So we're gonna talk gavel in the Assembly Public Safety Committee to order. It is Wednesday, November 1st, and it is just after 11 o'clock. We'll start with introductions. Ms. Domboski.
Amy DeBoski.
John Weddleton.
Christopher Constant.
Eric Croft.
Dick Traney.
Forrest Dunbar.
Pete Peterson.
Tim Steele.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Dean Diggs. Justin Ball. Dennis LeBlanc.
Maybe if we can just go this back row.
Mandy Honest, Clerk's Office.
Bill Falsey, hearing for the first time as a municipal manager.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be an applause line.
It's your second meeting, there'll be no applause. Don't worry about that.
That's where the booze come in.
Todd Sherwood, Assistant Municipal Attorney and former employee of Bill Falls.
That's who you know.
Kristen Smith, Communications Director, Mayor's Office.
And we have a full or relatively full audience. I have 5 people signed up to testify. You don't have to sign up, but if you would like to testify and haven't signed up already, it helps us know who did, send you a note, keep in communication with you, that sort of thing. So if you want to, just let me know, and we'll have Mandy come get you signed up. We had 2 items on the agenda, relatively short. An update on the Turnagain Arm Enforcement from Chief Dahl of APD, and an update on lighting and cameras at the boat launch from the Port Director. I asked Dennis LeBlanc of the Fire Department to be here to respond, because we also had over last week and then Monday and Tuesday 2 or 3 citizen complaints that raise a lot of the issues we've been discussing in this committee. And so we wanted to spend some time on those, understanding what the limitations are, manpower, procedures, and how we respond better. So I propose that we do those 2 regular business items first. Chief Dahl, you want to update us on Turnagain Arm Enforcement?
Sure. So we started using the money appropriated by the legislature on October 1st, and the information I have is through October 24th, just because it usually takes us a few days to kind of collect everything together and compile it. But through the 24th, we've spent a little over 200 hours patrolling Seward Highway. That's resulted in about 250 traffic stops, about 184 citations. 89 of those were for speeding. But obviously the main goal of having patrol down there is not to write tickets, it's just to have a visible law enforcement presence and maintain safe traffic flow and so forth. So, that's why we've been doing a lot of outreach, letting people know that we're there. The main purpose is voluntary compliance to prevent people from driving dangerously. Whenever our folks are down there, there's a minimum 2 officers at a time, just so they can provide mutual support to each other, and that's been working out well. And this has all been done on straight time. This particular grant allows us to do it on straight time, where a lot of the grants don't allow us to do supplanting, and so we have to do it on overtime. This one doesn't. And so this has been a function of the patrol shifts and the traffic units spending time down there. So far, we've been getting a lot of good feedback. It's been going well.
And I'm sorry, about 200 man hours so far?
About 200 hours so far. And that was as of the 24th.
And how long, what length of effort is that? That is it 3 weeks? When did you start? No.
We started October 1st, so it's
Yeah.
just a hair over 3 weeks.
Okay.
And I know, like, for example, last night I was at midnight shift briefing at 11 p.m., and they were assigning officers to spend some time down there during midnight hours as well. So all the shifts are participating, including the traffic unit. It's a pretty constant stream of officers at all hours of the day and night.
I have Mr. Traney and then Mr. Weddleton and Mr. Peterson. Mr. Traney.
Chief, got a question for you. Relative to the appropriation from the state was $200,000
Correct.
per quarter. Could you let us know how that's relatively being used? I want to track its use, so if it gets to the point where we got to put more money into it, we can contact the state, or we can figure out how we can put city money if possible into it. I just don't want it to be wiped out and then not know we're running out before we get there.
Okay, yeah, we'd be happy to. Our initial sort of concept and projection was that it would run, that should get us through about March on this sort of level of patrol model. But I shouldn't be a problem to kind of give you an update maybe around the end of the year. That'd be about the end of the first quarter.
I'd appreciate that. Unless you got some other view on it, Eric.
No, that's great. That makes sense. Mr. Weddleton?
So my understanding is you can fund it roughly quarter time through March. Is that adequate amount? I mean, if you had unlimited money, would being down there 25% of the time be about what you shoot for anyway?
We probably would have a little bit more patrol down there if there wasn't a restriction on that. What we're trying to do is, since we have a finite amount of money that allows us to be there, is stretch that out as far as we possibly can. Obviously, a one-time grant for continuous patrol, I mean, at some point, we're going to come to the end of that and not be able to be there anymore. So some longer-term solution would be ideal. But our thought process was to use the money to get as much enforcement, as much effective enforcement and presence that we could out of it, and kind of stretch that as far as possible, and then give us time to kind of figure out what the next step would be.
Okay. Can I follow up?
Yeah, of course.
So the other policing effort down there, the Turning Arm Police Service Area, do you have any stats on that?
I am hoping that before the end of the meeting I will. We're going through the process right now, kind of doing the monthly reconciliation. What I expect to see is what we've seen so far, which is 1 or maybe 2 events per month that are actually billable. The majority of the stuff that we respond to down there tends to be highway associated.
So apparently there was a SWAT team, something down there in the last month
Recently?
or two. Yeah, someone down there said, the SWAT team was down there. And they wanted to know, are we paying for that or?
That doesn't ring any bells right off the top of my head, but I can ask around and find out. I don't. I'll have to think about that. I don't recall a SWAT call out down there right off the top of my head, but it might just be that I'm not thinking about it.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you've got these cars patrolling, are these the regular blue and whites, or are you trying to do this undercover to write more tickets, or do you want to be seen so that there's a natural slowing down of everyone just when the visibility of the blue and whites are there?
No, it's a good question. So the majority of it is marked patrol cars. The traffic unit has those kind of soft marked cars. They're different colors. They still have the push bumper and the lights and stuff, but they don't have the decals on the side. And so whenever they're down there, those are the vehicles that they'll be operating in. But for the most part, this is being staffed by the patrol division, so it's marked police cars. And that's the reason why. A marked police car obviously has high visibility, and that lets everybody know we're in the area, which is kind of
All right, thank you.
Mr. Constant?
Yeah, you tapped into a question for me off of what Mr. Weddleton said, and that is that I've come from the nonprofit universe, and all of the work we do to say the day you start your program, you try to start to work to figure out how you're going to fund it to continue. And do we have an effort right now to figure out how we're going to continue funding the patrols, or is it something that this committee needs to start thinking about now, first quarter budget revisions?
That'd probably be a good question for the brand new municipal manager.
Yeah, I think it is fair to say that we do not know how it continues to be funded after this grant runs out. It is something that the committee could be thinking about, and it's certainly something that we are thinking about.
Thank you.
Yeah, how much we step into areas that the state has pulled back from in plowing, in public safety, in a number of areas is tricky. If we don't do it, people's lives are affected. If we do it, we're sort of just taking over and funding for what the state arguably should do. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you. I'm going to switch topics for the chief. If anybody else has questions on the same topic, I'll wait.
Is that all the questions then on the turning an arm enforcement? Then yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Chief Dahl, I just wanted to switch gears and ask you about the tactical shooting range. And I don't think the committee's had an update. I drive by there every couple of weeks just to see how it's going. Can you give us an update on the status of that project, and when do you think it'll be able to be utilized?
Sure. I think that the last report I got on it was that it's going really well. The lieutenant in charge of the training section is sort of the one that's kind of overseeing it along with our resource manager, and so far they're pleased with the progress. It's not coming along quite as quickly as we'd hoped, but we think that we're actually going to be able to start using it sometime. If I remember it, sometime this month, like towards the end of November, unless there's some other issue that pops up. Not not everything will be fully online at that point, so we will probably phase our way into operations. So APD only at first until we get all of the security and other stuff online. And then hopefully by spring, we'll have other agencies be able to use it too, which is ultimately what it was designed for, to be sort of a regional use range for law enforcement. Much like what we do at the indoor range at the training center.
Sure, I'm very excited to see it come along. It looks like it's coming along fast. I mean, when I drove by, it's like all of a sudden, boom, there it is.
Yeah.
So it's exciting to see, and it might be an interesting exercise for some of us Assembly members to watch you guys train there.
Yeah, we'd love to have you guys out for that. And I think at some point we're planning on doing kind of an opening ceremony, grand opening kind of thing too.
Amy and Dick and I want to go shoot too.
Need somebody to hold the target.
Mr. Trainee.
To the city manager, I asked the last city manager to give me a name to head up the naming committee. I need you to give me a name from your office to do that. I've got those from the assembly, but I do need to have a focal point in yours, because we need to get this named and get it ready to go. And Chief, we're more than happy to come out and shoot with your people if you let us there. Yep. We'll bring our own guns.
You might want to stand behind me.
I'm not as good as APD, I'm just saying.
Just tell us what the range is rated for, what heavy calibers we can use. We'll bring them.
You could probably bring anything in your inventory, and the backstop would be okay.
Oh.
And I know
If you really want me to try that, I'm more than willing to.
There's a challenge.
Evolving quickly.
We'll take you up on that offer, Chief. I appreciate that.
There's a challenge. Gauntlet.
Thank you, Chief Dahl. You can stay with us.
We'll take your 20 millimeters, Amy.
Yeah, sure.
Quick question for the chief. Actually, Chief Dahl, would you mind recapping some of the discussions that had happened regarding use of 311
Sure.
for non-emergency?
Sure. So this, Ms. LaFrance brought this idea forward to APD using 311 as a phone number the public could use to reach the police department in a non-emergency situation. From the police department's perspective, this is a great idea. One of the biggest issues that the 911 center has is getting 911 calls that really are not emergency calls. And right now, that's a problem for us right now, because there are physical lines that come into the 911 center that are the 911 lines, and there's only a finite amount of them. So if you fill those up, it becomes problematic. The new 911 system that's coming will not have that problem in the same way, so that'll be better. But it's still an issue, and a lot of folks I find have a hard time either remembering or finding the non-emergency number for the dispatch center, and so we think this would be a good solution. I know that other cities have used it for more of a kind of a municipal-wide, if you want to contact the muni for some reason, you call 311 and then you work your way through a menu. Obviously from the police department's perspective, something that just comes to APD is better, but I understand that there's some people interest there. We have had some initial discussion, I believe, with ACS, the service provider, and I don't think it's tremendously expensive to implement. In fact, my recollection is there's very little cost at all. Does that sound right?
One of Rouse is really the subject matter expert on that, but it is one that we're actively looking at, because it does seem like it could be positive for visual function, whether it becomes the police non-emergency connectivity like actually or the one-stop shop for any police service. If there's a tree down in my front yard, I don't know what to do about it. The storm drain is messed up.
Either way, we really like the idea of having it, so we're sort of actively pursuing it.
Mr. Trainee?
Could you let us know what the cost is going to be so we can put that into our budgetary process? Because I think it's important that we have this sort of system. Because I know when people die 911, it says, please, if it's not emergency, please dial blah, blah, blah number.
Need to fund an app.
I want the people just to be able to dial if it's not emergency, but they need a uniformed officer there. 311, Suzanne's correct. Let's figure out what this costs and figure out what we have to do to fund the money to make it happen.
Put in something for advertising as well.
Yeah, we would love to have a big sort of PR type of push on that.
Thank you, Chief.
If I had my way, I would say let's see if we're going to do a general municipal-wide services number, have it separate. It seems like if it's a nominal expense, let us create a dedicated line to APD, because that's a very high use need. And I have a constituent who sent me an email this week. 911 hung up on me. My car had been broken into. like, yeah, it wasn't an emergency, no one's coming after you, you could have called the other number. I didn't know the number, and so this literally is this week, and so there seems like high enough volume that's rational, and I would be very supportive of, if we're gonna do municipal wide, let's do both.
Any other?
I'll say respond to that. I think there's a design consideration, which is that the 211, 311, 411, 511 are all reserved, but they're all dedicated, and I think the only one that's left is 311. So we have to actually choose what we're going to do, but we'll be bringing this back to you. Thank you.
Good idea, Mr. Dunbar.
I mean, could we do just a simple, you call 311, takes you to one tree that just says 1 for police, 2 for everything else, something like that?
I think if we were to make 311 to catch all, that's exactly how it would happen.
Appreciate it. Chief Dahl will be back to you with other issues. Ms. LaFrance, you'd had an email this last week or maybe Monday on false alarms. Right. And you've gotten a response from the ombudsman. Have you gotten a response from the police department on it, or it's mainly a legal ombudsman type issue?
And I believe, actually, there's one more step that may occur that the ombudsman.
Okay, we'll work on it then, and I just wanted to know if you hadn't gotten a response, I'd ask him to. We will come back to APD with many of these, with issues that the public is bringing up and hear their response. Mr. Rebuffo on port and lighting. We had sent you out to do this, and you're back to report to us?
Yeah, among other things, if that's okay. And
Yeah.
I'll walk very slowly back to the chair so assembly members who have backs to the screen that might want to. This is videos and pictures. There's no words here. This is an unusual kind of presentation.
I'll turn around for that one.
Silent TV.
Yeah, this will get your attention.
Isn't it the Port of Alaska now?
Yeah.
It is.
I'm just.
And you do have it already designed that way.
Do we need to send you a memo?
No, I was there. So I recall that it happened. What we're doing is we figured, you know what, in for a penny, in for a pound, we're going to change the logo more so than we thought we were going to. So we're putting our creative juices to work to come up with a different one. So be patient with us. In the meantime, we'll stick with this since Mr. Traney told us we were not on the clock to
Thank
change
Mr.
all that
Dunbar
stuff.
for that. I would have had you on the clock immediately. At least this way now you can put on your resume, you're the director of the Port of Anchorage and director of the Port of Alaska. You can put both things
You
on
got
your
a
resume.
promotion, yeah.
Like he's talking about your
Papers
resume,
choosing,
though.
and I won't go to my new boss for any kind of a raise.
That's right, we'd turn it down, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, I figured. I can't stand
Why
public
waste your
humility.
time?
So once upon a time, there was an issue brought to this committee by one of the tugboat operators down in Cook Inlet Tug and Barge who had their home in their dock down there by the boat launch, regarding the issues with safety and untoward type folks hanging around down there, particularly in the wintertime at night when it was easy to hide. And there were some big concerns about that. So a portion of that responsibility rests with the Port of Anchorage because we are the caretakers for the boat launch. The other portion of that rests with the railroad because it's predominantly their property, and that which we are responsible for is actually leased from them anyway. So it's a long, convoluted story and not that anything anybody should be interested in worrying about. But at the end of the day, there were some legitimate needs for improvements that had to be done down there. And as we were in the process of putting all of that together, we had that one very bad winter about 3 years ago, and when spring came and the thaw came, we saw an incredible amount of erosion from the ice that took that north finger of the boat launch there and just made it incredibly dangerous. We even had to cordon it off because you didn't want people out there. The asphalt was sitting with nothing underneath it for a big portion of that. So there was a need to put those repairs in place at the same time. So we have a public safety consideration from two aspects of it. We don't want anybody to kill themselves, and we needed to put some new security measures in place to at least improve and inform what the heck was going on down there. So in total, it's a little short of $2 million to do the repairs on the boat launch itself and to put in place all new LED lighting on those poles that are our responsibility to manage, and a couple of surveillance cameras. So what I've got here is a video of the boat launch repairs and some photographs, snapshots pulled from those cameras, so you can appreciate just how good those cameras are. And it impressed the heck out of me when I saw it for the first time. If I can do this.
The anticipation's killing me.
Yeah, it's killing me too.
That was a
But
big buildup.
Here we go.
You did it at night, huh?
See, well, I didn't realize there was music going to play. I figured I was going to have to provide all the color commentary, so I'll try and speak over the tunes.
I made a
That's okay.
music video.
I'm kind of impressed because the boat launches never look this nice. You get down on the ground and you think it's a dump. You get up in the air and it's kind of nice looking. So all of that armor rock around both of those fingers is what we did this summer to repair it. And we also shored up the walls on the inside. So not only do you see the piling that support the floats going down the middle, you'll see pilings on both sides that mark where the wall is, so that if you're coming in a boat at the higher tide where you can't see the wall, you won't bang your boat against the wall. And we waited till a low tide to do this because the real method to the madness is we wanted to document what it looked like after construction was finished, so we can go back next spring after winter and look to see if we lost any of the rock that was put in place and get the contractor back out there to fix it.
Are you using a drone?
Yes. And I gotta buy me one of those.
New toy.
There are a bunch of those already.
You get an appreciation also for how quickly it silts back in after you've taken the silt out, because we cleaned it out in June, and it doesn't take very long to get back in. You can see the walls that we put, the new walls that went in on the sides. We were getting some erosion, and the ice was tearing out those blocks that were holding the walls in place. And the engineers tell us with that extra security there, you'll get less or no more of that tearing out of that material.
So did we have to haul in this fill from somewhere, or
500 trucks. And none of you got a phone call.
No.
So kudos to the contractor.
It would come to him.
And we didn't. It's not like
Yeah, when the contractor
Ed
said there'd be
Stevens.
500 dump trucks delivering rock to the small boat launch, we got pretty excited about that, but it turned out to be not bad.
You charge them every time they went to the gate.
There is no gate. Which is part of the problem.
That's right.
So that's kind of a flyby of the new boat launch.
Mr. Buff?
Thank you. So, you've got to have some idea of how much, historically the tides here are so strong.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly you were smart. You documented this at low tide. You've got to have some sort of guess of how much you're going to lose over the course of the winter.
Yeah, my concern will be along the bottom, because once you got to watch the toe.
Mhm.
If the toe stays in place, everything above it will stay in place. And they selected the rock and put it in, they didn't just dump it. They actually had backhoes out there and they placed it like putting a puzzle together. It took a little bit longer than we had forecast because of that. But, rock are supposed to lock together, and if you position them correctly, that's the solution that you get. So from the look of it, you can tell it's pretty darn sturdy and pretty darn solid. But to your point, the ice out here in the wintertime is, Mother Nature's smarter than us when it comes to this kind of thing. So it was good to have a picture of what it looked like so that we can go back later and see what the weak points were, if there were any.
Mr. Steele?
When's the last time it was rebuilt?
Never,
Ever?
never.
That was the original?
Yes.
Now, Ship Creek, does Ship Creek, is it along one side of that?
Ship Creek's on the north side. We're looking west right now.
Yeah.
And the finger on the north side, Ship Creek's on the other side.
So you not only get tidal damage, but you get river damage as well. Well,
Not as
potentially.
much. Yeah, I think the real culprit is the ice in the wintertime. Tides not so much, but the ice for sure. So this is, here the tide is in, and you get an idea of, and the floats are out. So they're out for the winter now. Otherwise, they'd be right down the middle, attached to those middle pilings. And the pilings on the right and on the left of that mark where those walls are, so that kayaker, when he comes in, won't scrape his boat. You go down the chutes. Don't go down the outsides. We've got a little bit of marker painting to do on those piling. What we're going to do is put numbers on there, how many feet above the top of that wall the water is. So we will mark that as another safety indicator for the boaters for next year. But a little too late to worry about that this season. These are what's called a pan tilt zoom camera. There's two of them. They're in a little globe. They are motion activated, so we point them in areas that we want a straight view picture of on a recurring basis. But if anything moves within the frame of that camera, it will slew to what it is that made it move, and give an indicator to the security guy in our security center at the port, who monitors all of our surveillance cameras, if there's something going on down there, and he gets a chance to look at it and make a determination of whether or not it's a big deal or something that we would have to report. So this is our responsibility. That building is the restroom that's out there at the boat launch. Our responsibility is everything on this side of the restroom. Everything on that side is the railroads. Same view at night.
And neither the railroad nor you have security on site.
That's correct.
At any time, but at night or just
Ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
You've got somebody though watching 2 motion sensor cameras who
We
can
got somebody
send.
watching 45
Okay,
cameras.
including these 2.
Including these 2.
Okay.
Yeah. And what I wanted to show here was, I wish I had a before picture, but these are LED lights that we put up there. We went with the new MLMP standard for the Muni and put those in. So these will have the control nodes on top, so we could eventually turn the intensity down, turn the intensity up if we need to, and control that from our security center. But this is kind of a picture of what it looks like at night out there now with the new cameras. And this is way more light than we have ever had out there before. And the tugboat guys, who are the big critics, are thrilled to death. At least that's what they're telling me. Maybe they'll tell you something different, but what they're telling us is they really appreciate it. Looking in the, again, just a little bit of a different look. All the cars that are parked over there by what looks like a Connex, those are the tugboat operators' vehicles, which were in the dark before. So they are not anymore.
I was gonna ask, so what use is there in the winter at night? It's tugboat operators that park there?
That's it.
There's not many people, or
No,
very
well,
few.
there's the curious that come down here at night, case in point, and so we were able to keep an eye on these folks, and you can actually, it's hard to tell here in the presentation, but you can see inside vehicles pretty clearly with these cameras. I can't read driver's licenses. I can't read match
Sorry,
plates.
not licenses, license plates.
We haven't had anybody park at an angle where we could try and see if that's the case or not. But we had this one in. This is the last one here. Yeah, don't be walking down those floats at night.
Go for
But
a
it's,
swim.
but it's bright enough now where you can see folks being where they don't belong.
I'm sure they have an odd schedule.
So that's not illegal, that's just you monitor it to see if they're
Yeah,
doing
it's
anything.
unwise. It's
Right.
not illegal. It's unwise. Because if that gets slippery.
Any questions
Yeah.
on this or any aspect, Mr. Trainee?
Steve, the bathroom, is that open to the public, or is that closed during the winter, or what?
Yes, it's closed during the winter. During the season, when the boat launch is open, the bathrooms are open from, I think, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
We put auto locks on the doors so that they lock themselves. And we also have a cleaning contractor who goes down there and checks the condition of the facilities and services the toilet paper and hand towels and that kind of thing. It does the
Thank you.
Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So 2 questions, Steve, and I realize that this just went in, so we don't have the sort of year after year data,
No.
right, comparing one season to another, and I assume that use is going to fluctuate month to month as the other things do, but have you seen a difference in use or these kind of illicit visitors since this went in? And the second, in the example you gave of those people kind of, the picture of those people milling around, did that, and I apologize if you said this and I just missed it, did that warrant the call out? Did then your security guy drive out there and say, hey, what are you guys doing here?
Here's what we've come to an agreement with, and we've met with APD. We met with the police department about 2 years ago. The port, the railroad, and APD met because we all kind of overlap jurisdictions down there, and we wanted to come to some kind of agreement on where everybody's lines of responsibility are drawn and who has to call who if they see something going on down there. And we all signed that agreement, and that's now been in place for 2 years, and we reconfirmed that recently. But we also had a conversation with a couple of representatives of the police department, whose names I don't remember, unfortunately. But about now, what do we do? Because come check out these cameras. We can give you a pretty, give you a pretty good idea of what's going on. It's not blurry stuff in the dark anymore. It's pretty clear indication of what the heck is happening. And what we were told was, don't be afraid to call the police department if you see something that you're suspicious of. And they will make the call as to whether or not a response is warranted. Don't make that judgment call yourself. We also are very careful because we don't want to wear out our welcome. Everything is not a concern. There's a lot of curiosity in that whole area. But until we do something more restrictive, like put a fence in place, and I think I mentioned this once at an assembly meeting. If you're going to put a fence in there, because at certain times of the year, the only people that really have any business being down there are the tugboat operators and nobody else. Well, the railroad's got to be in that conversation because the railroad has to take that on. It's their property where that fence would be. It's not the city's. So we're not there yet. We do have some conversations going with them about the whole Ship Creek boat launch area in general and making it something more attractive to the right kinds of people and less attractive to the nuisances. But that's going to take a little bit of time and a little bit of coordination to turn that into something that really would attract people to come down there in the summertime and be a little bit more secure even sooner than getting down to the cameras of the boat launch. So more to come on that.
That was yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, we hope that this does it right. I mean, fences are an appropriate thing, but people who just have a legitimate, even if unwise, interest in going down there and looking around, we hope that solves it and we don't have to go to the next level. Ms. Domboski.
One of the things, Steve, first I want to say, I think you guys did an amazing job. I think the remake of the boat launch looks great. I think the cameras, I'm amazed how good the resolution is. One thing that's an intermediary step, is that the right word I'm going for? That between the fence and between the cameras, that oftentimes will deter bad behavior. Do you have signs up that say you're on camera?
We haven't put any signs up yet.
Because for me, it's great seeing all these guys, but a lot of times the bad guys don't realize that those are actually
Yeah.
cameras because let's just be honest, we're not dealing with stores. But if they see a big sign that says you're on camera, they might choose to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's fair. The other side of that coin that we worry about is, and we put a sign there, they go looking for it, and they find it, and somebody shoots it out.
Yeah,
You got a good picture of who's shooting out your camera then.
The last thing it did.
But that was my question, you're right. Big sign. Mr. Steele.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned that we have cameras now. That's a little bit of security, if you will. But we went through this hassle and people destroyed that area. It's not just the natural occurrence of the tides and currents. And I'm concerned we put all the money into it, and we're going to wait and see what happens in that regard. So I wouldn't wait too long if you see that it's going to be an attractive nuisance.
Sure.
And, because I'd hate to have wasted a little bit.
I appreciate that. Point taken.
Any other questions of Steve? Congratulations on your promotion to Director of the Port of Alaska.
Thanks, I think.
Didn't have to move anywhere, did you?
I knew the job was dangerous when I took it.
That's who you know.
And so we'll move on to old business and audience participation. Yeah.
Before we do, is it possible, I would really love an opportunity to talk with the fire chief, specifically because we just had a very large fire in Eagle River, and I have specific questions.
That would be great. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Chief Pavonka, it's great to see you. First, I want to commend the response of the Anchorage Fire Department and the coordination with CBFD and all the different units. I do have some specific questions about the fire that just happened. This particular location, for committee members who don't know, there are parts of Eagle River that are not in the Anchorage Fire Service area. And once you get to a certain place on Eagle River Road, fire service is, they say is stopped. They respond anyway, typically. But this particular house that caught on fire was just past the service area, so that's where my conversation is going to be going with the chief, just to give you a little background. So chief, can you give us first an outline of, if you know them, if you don't, I'd like an email, but response times for initial vehicles. I would like to know kind of just general response, how long it took the other Anchorage crews to get to this particular area, and then what role CBFD played and at what time they were called, just general.
Well, the first call came in at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was a large residential structure on the south side of the road, and it had a pretty significant elevation change from Eagle River Road down to the residence itself, which proved a little bit problematic. APD was on scene first. They were reporting flames to the height of the trees. When we got there, it was fully involved. It wasn't a hydrant area, so we needed tenders, and that's where the Chudiak volunteers responded in an admirable fashion. We used 2 of their tenders for quite a period of time. I don't have the exact response times with me, Mr. Bosky. I can get that. I can get the run report, share that with you. The fire proved very problematic. There were about 18 vehicles, campers, trailers, different types of automobiles, tightly packed around the structure. They were all either partially or completely destroyed in the fire. When we got there, it was a total defensive fire. There were 2 occupants of the residence. They both were able to self-evacuate and had minor burns. We transported both patients to Providence Hospital. And for 3 hours, 3.5 hours, we put water on the fire. The building effectively collapsed on itself and into the basement of the house, which proved very problematic because now there was hot spots, smoldering fires down under the debris. We thought by about 8:30 we had successfully knocked the fire down. And what we typically do is we go for post-fire checks, and we had established a post-fire check at 9:30 a.m. So the crews had left the scene at 9:22, 8 minutes before we were going to come back anyway. A passerby noted smoke and flames. We responded again, and we remained on site with 3 to 4 units in the tender support, delivering water for probably most of the day until we were able to work through the owners and their insurance company to what I understood was going to happen. I haven't confirmed this, but I believe it happened. They were contracting with a construction company or a demolition company to bring out an excavator and begin to basically root up the debris piles so that we could continue to put water on it. That continued till probably mid to late afternoon, and then for the next 7 or 8 hours, I think we finally stopped at about 1:30 this morning. We would go back every hour to check on the status of the fire.
And full disclosure, my husband was the initial captain that was responding to this fire. He was on duty that day and he works at Station 11. But I specifically didn't talk to him about the fire because I didn't think it'd be appropriate. So that's why I'm asking you the question.
And we actually had 17 units on scene, including the 2 tenders from Chudiak at one time.
And part of the reason I'm asking about the coordination, and this is why I get so sensitive about tenders, when we talk about Tender 9 in South Anchorage, there are areas of our community that don't have hydrants. And so, as opposed to I'm not tender.
Just making that point. Go right ahead. Yeah.
I had a feeling. But this is why I get really sensitive about areas that aren't hydranted, because you do have to do water shuttles. And we have the benefit in Eagle River of calling on CVFD because a big portion of Chudiak is not hydranted. So Chudiak is really good at water shuttling. It's commonplace for Chudiak. So my question, over the years, we've really had trouble coordinating between Anchorage and Chudiak. It's almost like a little bit of a rivalry over the last few years, though I really feel that's become more of a partnership. So that's just something that's been a constant theme for me, is just to check the coordination and make sure we're responding, asking for help as soon as we recognize we need it.
We have a great relationship, of course, with the new chief, Tim Benningfield, and Senior Captain Mike Murphy, who is at Station 11. They do a lot of cooperative training, and yesterday's response and cooperation, collaborative efforts were flawless.
And so this leads to my second conversation. Over the years, there's been discussions whether this portion of Eagle River was going to ask to join the Anchorage Fire Service area, meaning this is the challenge, and I suspect, I don't know, we'll see, this person potentially could get a many hundreds of thousands of dollar bill. So that's where I'm asking, they're out of the fire service area, is AFD planning on sending them a bill for the fire operations?
We will, but earlier this year, the internal auditor, Mike Chadwick, asked if we had any special studies that we wanted them to look at. And we said yes, out-of-area billing rates. If you recall, about a year and a half ago, the Turnagain Armpit down on the Seward Highway caught fire. We were there for a cumulative period of 30 hours. If you add up all of the time, the apparatus was there. The bill was about $1,300.
That's it.
Our out-of-service billing rates are inappropriate. They are way too low. In fact, I have a meeting with Mike Chadwick and his staff tomorrow. It had already been scheduled before this fire yesterday to review the expense that the municipality incurs when we respond to areas outside of our fire service area, and the gross underbilling. Because it's cheaper to not have fire insurance. Just wait for the event. Fire department will come out. You'll get about a $2,000 bill. Hopefully your business or your residence is not completely destroyed, as opposed to paying potentially thousands of dollars a year in the chance. So that study will be done by the municipal internal auditor, and of course it'll be reviewed by you all, and we will propose at some point in time a significant increase in the billing rates for out-of-service area responses.
And that's where I was expecting these people would get $1 million bill, frankly.
No.
Or, maybe not $1 million, but a very substantial bill. And do you know in the situations where they do get bills, does their homeowner's insurance pay for that, or do you have any idea?
No, I don't.
So,
I think the rate is it's a $500 flat fee for the first hour, and then it's an incremental amount for successive hours. The two cases I'm gonna review with the auditor tomorrow, significant fires, and not one of the bills was over $2,500. So we're subsidizing those people who live outside of the fire service area, and they're just betting on the come that I don't need the insurance because the bill I'm gonna get from the fire department is chump change.
Well, secondly, I have some residents, a couple years back, there were a couple that were actually interested in joining the Anchorage Fire Service area. So could you take a look at that portion of Eagle River Road all the way to the end and see what it would look like with the, would you help me kind of analyze that? Because, you know, I look at it this way, either one, the rest of Anchorage is paying for that fire service, really, if they need it. Or two, the people can choose to be covered, which clearly will mean they'll have to pay for it.
And, yes, we can, and of course, you understand there are portions of the hillside that are outside of the fire service area, and of course, everything down to Girdwood, south of Potter's Marsh, is outside of the fire service.
And the only reason I bring it up is, as I'm not saying it's a good idea or a bad idea, but I've had residents of Eagle River Road actually come to me and say, what does it take to get into it? And fundamentally, what it means is those residents have to vote themselves in, but the rest of Anchorage has to vote to let them in as well. So it's worked. Sometimes it's worked in our area, sometimes not. People can or can't drive, but it's just something I like to point out because they clearly were out of the fire service area, and it clearly is going to be a cost to the municipality.
I'll get you.
Thank you.
Mr. Weddleton.
Well, I just follow up on the hillside. If you're taking a look at it, take a look at the hillside too.
I wonder if we can do a big vote once to say anyone who wants in the service area can come in. We don't have to have a big vote every time. Just vote yourselves in. We want you in, come in when you want, and then it applies whenever they do. But I don't know.
That's just specific to the fire service area. That problem exists in spades with roads.
Oh yeah, and we might make a different decision. Hey, everybody come in on fire whenever you want, just let us know.
Well,
but we'll decide on the other stuff.
And I can tell you, I'll give you an example of Powder Ridge, for example. They're actually in the Chugach Volunteer Fire Department service area, and I think this is probably last time you were city manager, maybe not. But that particular part of Eagle River wanted to join the Anchorage Fire Service area, so they actually voted themselves in. However, CVFD was very effective at lobbying to keep that portion of their district, so the rest of Anchorage said, no, you can't come in. So there's times where, I mean, politics enters for sure. And I'm, a big supporter of both, so I'm not making any judgments. I'm just saying there's times when maybe that universal vote isn't exactly what ultimately people want. I don't know.
Mr. Steele.
It seems to me it would be a pain in the patootie to try and manage if you had parcel here, parcel there, parcel here, in or out of the service area, rather than having a defined line that everything within and everything outside of. And so it's logical to me to set it up so that you're doing it correctly and make your argument and try to get the vote. It just.
And Mr. Steele, to your point, if I may, Mr.
Yes.
To your point, this isn't just with fires in Eagle River. We have the nature center that's out of the fire service area too, and we've had people that have had different types of emergencies back there. And we have area-wide EMS, but there comes a certain cutoff point where, depending on the type of emergency, sometimes the captain makes a decision on his own whether he's going or not. And that's a decision we're putting in the hands of captains, which sometimes they're not necessarily, or battalion chiefs, they're kind of going on a case-by-case basis. Do we respond or do we not? Because who from the state's going to come? You deal with the same thing on Flex, right? So.
Well, the problem is that usually when there's a problem like that, it's up the trailways, and so it's more than just driving the parking lot.
Oh yeah, well we have six-wheelers and stuff like that they take back there. But
Structure fires, we will always go, regardless of the location.
I appreciate your
Anything else on this, Smother? Thank you for bringing that up. So the summary is they're gonna get a bill, but it's probably gonna be way too low.
Yes, sir.
Subsidized bill.
And you're looking into that.
That was the exact opposite of what I was expecting to hear.
You'd be shocked.
Well, it's good information though. I appreciate it.
We have a number of members, 5 who have signed up of the public.
John was trying to get.
Were you wanting back in on this issue?
Well, you didn't have the agenda, but we had some emails on, talking about fire permits.
Yeah, that's what we're, no, Judge Rhodes and Mr. Webb are here, and I asked AFD to be here specifically for that. So we did, in effect,
Okay.
add it into the agenda by having it as audience participation. Briefly on old business, and part of the reason this was a somewhat light agenda, I have been working on a committee meeting on the bail schedule. We've talked a lot about that. I got a copy of it. I'm trying to understand it and present it in a certain way. We've had updates on crime data, and I'm trying to have a meeting on that in a rational discussion. A lot of people, I think, project their own views on the crime data, and so it's easy to use it whichever way you want. We've had a lot of work, of course, on SB 91 and 54, and to some extent we've been dealing with things in a theoretical sense on data or on on how we approach it. I'd like to have meetings and treat the opiate epidemic. We had a presentation on that, but what the treatment options are, and also I've been talking with the city prosecutor about whether there's ways for her office to handle felony prosecutions that are referred to the state, that the state for resources sends back. That is a particularly horrible domestic violence assault that starts as a misdemeanor, but you look at it and say that's a felony, send it to the state, the state says we're not taking it. What we would be getting into if we said, all right, then we'll take it as a felony. In terms of training, in terms of our obligation, it's similar to turning an arm and snow plowing in. They should be doing it, but if they're not doing it, do we step in and do it? So all those issues I've been working, but they weren't quite ready for this agenda. Fortunately, the public in 3 different situations kind of has come forward over the last week, and I think what it creates for us for the half an hour we have left is a way to take a lot of the theoretical stuff we've been talking about and hear real world examples and talk to both the police chief and the fire chief on how they're responded to, and understand whether that's a manpower problem, whether it's a enforcement allocation of resources problem, whether it's an ordinance change problem, and we should do something about it. So sort of get down into, some specifics and see whether there's something we can do, and if not, why not. So I'd like to move, so concluding audience participation, those are old business, sorry. Those are the things I'm working on to bring before the committee. If there are others that you're interested in, please email me about them. Ms. LaFrance had a particular one on false alarms and what qualifies as that. And so I'll be working those into the agenda schedule for the next 3 months.
Well, I think that one we need to add and have a special meeting for, which might be a byproduct of this conversation, is going to be how we're going to address the question of the ordinance that was postponed until December the 5th. And there isn't a meeting of this committee before then, and so we ought to put something in order.
It's a homelessness ordinance, and that's the chairman of the homelessness committee.
It's actually a public safety issue.
And if I could, Mr. Chair.
Wait a minute. So, no, go ahead.
So Mr. Croft and I talked about this, about the potential of doing another joint meeting, because you're right, it is an issue that is in both worlds.
Right. So that'll be a joint meeting, and Felix and I will get together to get that scheduled. I have 5 people signed up. Did anyone decide that they wanted to testify after that? You did. All right. We'll get you back on the list.
Linda Chase.
Yes. Ms. Chase was deciding whether she wanted to be on my list or not, or just do it when she wanted to. So we'll put her on the list. Mr. Webb and Judge Rhodes, we normally keep it to 3 minutes each. Do you have an order you want to go? Do you want to start, Stephanie?
Normally I defer to my wife.
Yes, I thought you might.
Smart person.
Wise man. We just have you stand up here and just don't get in the way of the interpreter's sightline. Yeah.
Okay, can I have a chair to put these down?
Yes. Yes, you
Have
can.
some notes that I think I need. Thanks.
Welcome, and thank you for your service before. I served in front of you as a prosecutor on your wellness and other, and appreciate your service also on the 91 Criminal Justice Commission.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the respectful use of my former title. I am a retired judge, and therefore I have now had my First Amendment rights reinstated. And so I am here as a citizen. I am a resident of the South District downtown. For many years, I have enjoyed the Chester Creek Trail for walking with my husband and my beautiful dog, who I now get to spend more time with. It is a jewel in the crown of our trail system, and as you know, for many years now, it has been sort of degraded by a lot of encampments. And I'm going to make my comments in the context of the fact that I understand the complexity of homeless issues. I understand that this assembly has a separate committee working on those. I'm fully familiar with all of that. I also make these comments in the context of wanting to really thank the police department and the fire department for their incredible efforts, particularly during periods of such incredible shortages that it has been so difficult to care for this community. Nevertheless, I feel compelled to come to this committee, the Public Safety Committee, to talk specifically about the issues that I'm going to raise. First, I'm going to raise the issue that on October 23, my husband and I were walking on the Chester Street, where we walked quite a bit. And yes, we have noticed all of the homeless camps that have been very, really not just eyesores, but incredible hazards to our community in so many ways. But specifically, we came upon a large camp that was really a homestead. And we've supplied some pictures here to you, but I have some as well to give you today that are specifically in context. On October 23, we walked by a very huge green tarp wall tent with actually duct taped glass windows into it. It had a chimney stack coming out of it, and it had an active fire going. And there were also 5 propane bottles outside of that tent, and also a tremendous amount of other things, including a grill for cooking on top of a chest freezer, I might add. In any event, we called the fire department because there was an active fire. And the report that I received back indicates what they told us that day, which was, and we were surprised to hear it, there was apparently a stove inside of the wall tent. The stove was properly vented according to what we understood. They told us these individuals had read the regulations and that they had followed whatever said regulations were to have this approved container. The issue was that the burning materials they were using were sticks and brush from around the homeless camp, so they were asked to extinguish the fire. They were told they couldn't use those materials in the future, and they had to have cured firewood. The next day, we went by the camp, and lo and behold, there we have 2 bundles of firewood. And again, they're burning. So I guess I am questioning the issues of, first of all, what would an approved container from outside fire in a homeless tent look like under our laws? And I guess that would be pretty much the issue that I bring before the folk here. I'm not familiar with this area of law, though I am familiar with many others. But I just have to say that it seems to me like if this, in fact, is following some sort of municipal code, I think this poses a tremendous hazard to our community. I also have many pictures that demonstrate, which I will hand in to you, that demonstrate other camps where it's really clear that there are burn units of all types. People basically are making their daily coffee in grills that are literally located right next to their tent. Like they stick their hand out of a flammable tent and make their coffee there. There are Brinkmann stoves, there are bottles of propane, there are all kinds of burn equipment here that I will hand you. There's just burned fires. It's clear that there are fires everywhere. There's kindling wood stacked all along the coastal trail, the Chester Creek Trail there. So I really encourage you to think about what brought this all to bear and whether it is, in fact, as you have said, either a misunderstanding of laws that exist, a workforce issue, there are workforce issues, or whether there's actually something that needs to be created as a far more bright line here to assure that fires simply are not occurring in that area. Rogers Park, some years ago, was in fact evacuated because of a fire in that area. So these are very, very serious situations, and separate and apart from the situations having to do with how we remove tents from that area.
Great. I'll let you go a little long because I've never known how to stop you.
Nope. I'm going to find my P's and Q's today, and what I'm going to do is hand in these photos, if I may do it for you now.
And Mr. Webb, if you'd like to add whatever you wanted to supplement it, and then we'll ask both the fire and police chief to respond. We'll have a discussion about this.
before he starts, I just want to add that there was one night where every propane tank on my block was stolen.
Oh,
One night, all of them were gone. So.
Mr. Webb?
Thank you. I would like to follow up and address what I see as the problem in terms of safety and health. And I will distinguish it from the problem of homelessness and look at it in a way that I now perceive it, which is people occupying public space voluntarily and developing essentially homesteads or long-term, near-permanent campsites. I've been, for the last 12 years since my retirement, a near daily user of our trail system, Chester Creek Trail primarily. I have seen over time a growth, proliferation of camps, both in number and size, dramatically in the last 3 years. The population of the campers, like my wife, I am intimately familiar with problems of homelessness, problems of addiction, mental illness, other things that are associated with homelessness. The population I see in the camps today is not our chronic inebriates and people with mental illness. These are younger people in their 20s and 30s developing homesteads with plenty of energy and lots of forethought and effort put into the development. They are, in many respects, I think, I've seen and photographed what I perceive to be bicycle chop shops throughout, with proliferation of bike frames, tires, wheels, parts of all sorts. These are probably a result of what I perceive, at least in South Addition, a theft of a bicycle nearly every day. The propane issue proliferates as well. There are propane tanks, 5-gallon propane tanks, not 1-gallon propane bottles, 5-gallon propane tanks all over the place. There are mountains of trash. There are used syringes. There's human waste. These are public health and safety issues. These are not homelessness issues. I think, frankly, the effort that the Assembly and the municipality have made regarding the homelessness problem is beginning to have some effect. I don't see chronic inebriates on the trail system in the way that I once did. What I see now is an entirely new population. And this is not going to be solved by the approaches that we are employing now. A 15-day notice doesn't get it. I've reported many of these camps. I've seen one removed. I'll finish up. The gentleman with the stolen solar panels. His camp was immediately reoccupied and has been permanently occupied since then. We have to have somebody out there every day preventing them from hauling all this stuff in. We can't do it with a 15-day notice. Thank you.
Webb, thank you. You retired from the Mental Health Trust Board, right?
I just terminated my period as a trustee of the Mental Health Trust Authority. I was chair until September.
Yeah.
I retired from the Department of Health and
Department of
Social
Health.
Services.
Thank you for your service there. I've got Mr. Trainee and Ms. Dombrowski, but I want, can I get a brief response both from AFD and APD, mainly AFD on the fire issue, and then I thought we had plenty of time, but now we're down to about 20 minutes and I have 3 more, so Mr. LeBlanc, any response, but specifically, is somebody out of fire code, can they be in fire code when they're in an illegal camp?
I'd have to defer to somebody who knows that answer. I will admit that I think the understanding throughout the 13 fire stations, the 3 shifts, the 39 response opportunities that we've got, it's probably not clear, because it isn't clear to me what exactly is our authority. When we get called to, and it's generally smoke in the area, and we know by the geographic area that it's probably a homeless camp. There is a real risk to the firefighters where they have to try to enter all of those camps upwind. As many times it is a homeless camp where they're burning the insulation off of copper wire. And we've experienced a line of duty death in the Anchorage Fire Department because a firefighter got into an environment like that. So we approach those scenes with a great deal of caution and seriousness. We aren't the police, so we're very careful in how we deal with the people. We try to explain to them that the fire is not approved and it must be extinguished. This one was a little bit poetic in the way it was written. It was a surprise to me that the fire captain suggested that this is probably okay. It's a good container to have a fire in, but you're burning the wrong material. That's a little bit of a surprise to me, and we're going to work through that so that we all have a clear understanding of what we can and we can't do. But we're limited in our interaction with the campers because, again, we're not police. We're just trying to be instructive and then put the fire out. But we have no means or capacity to seize anything and bring it somewhere because we don't have storage, and our fire trucks don't have capacity to seize camper stoves or propane bottles. What we always do, though, is if we can ensure ourselves that, or satisfy ourselves that the camp has been posted and APD knows about it. If not, when we return to the station, we go onto the website and we fill out the proper form to identify the camp for the capital patrol.
Do you know which of those happened in this? That is, was it posted already, or did you guys post it, or do you not know?
I don't know if it was or not.
Neither of those.
Not posted, and the fire department was not posted. They contacted APD. They
It
said
wasn't in the report that they sent.
Yeah, we have given instructions twice to our station captains on what to do when they come upon a camp. When they get back to the station and they have to fill out the RMS report, then at the same time they go on to the website and identify the homeless camp location.
Okay, and I want to get the other, but quickly, Mr. Falsey, I know it was the job you left, but do you know whether something can be compliant with the fire code if it's in an illegal location? That is, be appropriate in a fire sense, but in an inappropriate location?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do know the answer to that, and it's kind of an academic question because we have a larger rule, which is to say you cannot burn open fires in municipal land at all. So in the Parks Code, the Public Lands Code 2025, prohibited activities generally, except where specifically designated, no person may engage in any of the following activities on municipal land. 1, camping. 2, building fires. And further, in parks, we have a specific rule: no person shall light, build, use, or maintain any open fire or portable camp stove within a park, except for the areas that are designated by the director. Part of what may be happening here is that the fire code guys are enforcing the fire code on a day-to-day basis. They're not enforcing the public lands and parks rules. I will say that the system was probably designed to address the scenario where I walk onto a park with my camp and someone says, hey, Falsey, you can't be here. And then I say, oh, sorry, and I take all my stuff and leave. It was not designed with these pictures in mind. And I think this has focused a fresh attention on what to do with these pictures in mind. So
Okay.
It's a work in progress.
A lot of interest in this, and I thought we'd have more time. So it sounds like, Chief, you should be communicating to, we'd appreciate you communicating to your line of fire. It's never, like, don't give them advice that they have to do it in a certain way. Tell them not. Yeah.
Well, as I said, that was a surprise to me because typically it is you cannot and you must extinguish it, and we do extinguish it, and then we leave, and then we report it. So
But the chief
Just
is
a
right
quick
to say
intervention.
that
Wait, no,
after saying
yeah.
to extinguish the fire, there is the continuing thorn in our side of what to do with the stuff. Because we have some scenarios where we impound things when they're being used improperly. You are involved in a DUI, we might take your car, but we have to store that car. We don't get to keep it forever. And that is the part of the system that we do not have in place now.
We're going to come back to this. We got a piece of it. I want to make sure that the actual people who came here to tell their story get to tell it. And then if we run out of time, we're not having them left off, but our discussion left off. So, Mr. Croft, Is Rob Croft here? 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Robert Croft with BTY Dental, located in 726 East 9th Avenue. 1 year that I've been working there, I encountered multiple incidents. One being 2 burglaries by same person, 1 assault with deadly weapon in front of our parking lot to our employee. Both of those incidents, we were able to capture the suspects in camera. The burglary suspect, I was actually encountered outside of our business, and I actually was there to follow him, who actually walked onto the homeless shelter by the 3rd Avenue. And the other assault suspect, I see him multiple times near our business as well, and we contacted the police. Police never gave us the police incident number, so I personally called back, and the police sergeant told me that the employee who got assaulted is the one who actually has the call. So she called, but never got the return phone call back. So I know the police are overwhelmed, I'm sure they are, but I came here to get some answers as to how we can deal with these type of situations. And let me add that we get homeless encounters to our business daily. So they come in every day, asking for water, restroom, taking chapsticks, not chopsticks, but chapsticks. And then, they come in, many of them are mentally not fit, and they would babble for about 30 minutes before, you don't want to rush them out, but we are hesitant to call the police on them as well. So we have to deal with the issue daily. And now I'm going to move to another office, and I'm kind of afraid that staff who will manage that office will be by him or himself. And we do open until 8 p.m. So I just want to get some guidance and let you guys know that this is a real issue that some of us have to face.
So wait for 1 second. So you have an assault a case that has not been responded to?
I did have a contact with the sergeant, and our employee did make a contact, but it didn't seem like it's final contact that they would actually do something about, because we never got any confirmation number or case number.
And not yet a return phone call from the sergeant?
That I know of.
Can you follow up then with the chief so that he can follow up down the chain to make sure? That's just one piece of it. It doesn't solve your entire problem, I know. And did you say you're moving offices, but that office will remain?
Correct. We have a headquarters.
Oh, okay. And then you're
office. So I'm going to be working out of another office, but that location is viable location still.
We got 3 other people. Are there any questions, or can we move on and then get to? Great. Thank you, sir. Mr. Morrison, Rick Morrison.
Good afternoon. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Rick Morrison, formerly of Morrison Auto Group, and for the last 41 years, I've had a business that was in between 9th Street down to 11th Street. I've served on several committees. I've worked with several of the assembly members over the years. I've helped build several parks around the city. I've been very, very involved with the city. And being in that part of town, it's been a great place to have a business and conduct business. But over the years, we've had things that have kind of come and gone that have caused a lot of problems. We currently have got just a cesspool of a problem developing around 11th Street. My understanding is that even last week, we drove down, my wife and I drove down to take a look at what's going on in some of the properties. That there was 4 or 5 police cars on 12th Street, 3 or 4 of them on 11th Street. There were police officers all over the place. And then I think what I understand is that they went in to serve a warrant to have a person evicted from the apartments there. They found a counterfeiting operation going on. So I started asking some of the business people around the area, and some of them wanted to be here today, but unfortunately, these are business people trying to keep their business going in a very busy time. They don't have the time to come down here and talk about what's going on. But one of them said that they called multiple times about watching people inject needles in their arms in the street, and they'd call APD and can't get a response. There was other ones that talked about she was watching out of the window, and a woman is there obviously smoking some form of a bong. She would assume that she had either crack or some other inhalable drug. And then she gets back in her car, drives to the same apartments, takes her child out of her car, and takes them in and delivers them to what she thinks is a child care center being conducted in the place. If you look around the place, you can see that somebody has developed an automotive repair facility out of tents and other things, or a chop shop that extends all the way out into the car. You can't even walk down the sidewalk on the place. So I went over yesterday and I thought, well, just as a try, I'm going to pick up my phone and I'm going to do, one of the TV stations was really promoting the non-emergency line at APD, and I thought, well, I'm going to try it. I can't tell you how long I was on hold after I went through this whole tree of choices to try to get to where I wanted to get to. I couldn't get a hold of anybody to even report a motorhome that obviously had been dealing drugs that had been parked there for in excess of about 2 weeks. I've seen pictures of what appears to be a mobile heroin motorhome that travels the neighborhood. And my concern is that it's a great place at a good part of town, just right for redevelopment. We want to improve what's going on there, but if we can't get some of this cesspool problem cleaned up, it's going to be really difficult to attract business people. And I guess the way I look at it is every neighborhood in Anchorage should be safe enough that if your children or your grandchildren are going to walk through, you don't have to worry about what's going to happen. And you couldn't do that in this location right now. As a matter of fact, when I drive through, I'm very, very cautious, and I've lived in that place for the last 41, 42 years. So I called Christopher just to ask what I could do, and he asked me if I could come down and speak to some of the issues that's going on. I have several other business people around the area that would also like to speak to it. The problem they have is how do we get their information to you folks as the decision makers and still be able to conduct their business. So with that, I mean, maybe I can open up to some questions, but there's numerous code violations, there's continuous drug issues going on. I was shocked to find out it was a $100 counterfeiting deal that was going on in the same area. And yet when you talk to the business owners, they'll call, they're very frustrated because they can't get people to respond. And when they, one of the examples, the cars that are parked there, the people from Kendall would call and say, hey, these cars are in violation. We need to get them moved. Well, what would happen is they'd come over and they would red flag them. But people are smart enough to know, hey, they're red flagged. If I just move it from this position to this position, guess what? It's no longer a violation, but it still continues to be there and still continues to be a problem. I mean, I could go on for a lot longer, Chairman Croft, but it's, in view of the time and things getting short here, I'm not quite sure what to do. I just need some help in understanding how can we fix it.
We really appreciate it. We want to get the other two that have been signed up, but are there any more chairs? Well, maybe we'll have you back, but do encourage the other business owners to email the entire assembly, particularly me, but all the assembly, with as much specifics as they can so that I can relate that. Are you considering private security options?
As a matter of fact, we discussed this with a couple of the different ones that we may be doing this. The other thing that I think that we'll do is we'll go ahead and take a look at putting a camera. I've got a 3-story building over there that would be pretty easy to survey that whole area. We'd be happy to put a camera up there and see what we can do. Again, I'm going to go back to the 40 years that I've been there. I've seen the place improve, I've seen it struggle, I've seen it improve, but I have never seen it at the severity that it is today.
Yeah. Okay, I really appreciate it. And so I have Heidi and Linda. And I'm going to just go into a little bit of the public safety advisory. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
This chief, the situation he's describing, it sounds to me like it's a right area for the CAC team, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're already starting to look at this area. But Mr. Morrison, if you could after the meeting talk with Chief Dahl too, because we have a special team that will focus intensely on certain types of things. Am I off base on this one?
No, ma'am, that's pretty correct. And I mean, it sounds like there's a pretty significant police presence there already, and I believe that he's talking about a search warrant service at one of those locations where there was a pretty extensive investigation. So I mean, it's not like we're not paying attention to it. And I would also throw out there that while I realize that for some of these things that are really important neighborhood issues, but it's not an ongoing like person crime in progress. I mean, the wait times for those can be significant sometimes. So I will say again, we do not respond to calls for service, but things like that do take a significant amount of time for it to get an officer.
My thought was though, if he has specifics about this, like potential mobile drug dealing place.
Cat would definitely be interested in that.
I'm sure that CAC team would love to know more specifics.
Yep.
That would be helpful.
I agree.
We're not done. We're just move Heidi in. Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you, Rick. Welcome, Heidi. I'd be a lot thinner if you hadn't opened your business.
I think a lot of us would.
Yeah.
Heidi Heinrich with the Lucky Wishbone. In thinking about coming down here this morning and trying to describe what we go through on a daily basis, most of us have seen The Wizard of Oz, and we've seen the section where Dorothy is in the middle of the tornado and she's watching everything go by the window. The cows, the chickens, everything goes by the windows. That's kind of where we're at is this tornado. Unfortunately, it's not just staying outside and floating by. We're experiencing the tornado inside of our businesses. It's very difficult to conduct business downtown, especially when you're in the middle of the tornado in Fairview. Within the recent weeks, just a few of the encounters we've had. One evening in the middle of the dinner rush, a completely full restaurant, line at the door. A woman comes out of the bathroom with her pants around her ankles, covered with blood. She'd had a miscarriage. And in trying to help her and get her cleaned up, the bathroom cleaned up, she related to my employees that this was the 7th miscarriage she's had. She was obviously strung out. She was not doing very well. And, it hurts your heart to deal with these things. But it's very difficult to explain to the customers that, I'm sorry, this is a family business. You shouldn't have to see this, but this is what we deal with. Just 2 days ago, we had a couple sitting in an empty parking spot, literally in front of the business, sitting on the curb. We can't see from our angle out the window, but a woman came in with her children and the woman was performing a lewd act on the man right there in front of the business. What's happening isn't just the crimes of burglary and assault. It's literally assault on the common decency that we're having to deal with on a daily basis. We have a family restaurant. How do you keep your customers coming in? What do we do to change what's going on? Because what we're doing is not working. And there's a whole different climate. You can't in Anchorage separate public safety from the homeless issue. You can't anymore. It's not different. It's one and the same. It is a public safety issue. Unfortunately, I've dealt with it for so long, and as Rick said, it's changing now. As Mr. Webb said, it is changing. It is not just the inebriates. We're dealing with people that are not older. They haven't been on the street a long time. It's a new generation. They are using drugs. They are dangerous. They are scary. We had a gentleman with a rock the size of his head on his shoulder. I watched him for 20 minutes in and out of traffic with this rock. Not one time did he drop his hand with a rock this big. How does somebody have the strength to do that for 20 minutes? He was so strung out. His strength and what he was doing was just so out of line with what the human body ought to be able to do. I don't know what to do.
I don't know where to go anymore. You guys, most of you recognize me. I've been doing this I don't know how many years. If we had the money to pick up and move out of Fairview, it's getting close to that point where we would do that.
Don't go away, Heidi. Let's have Linda. We have one last, and then we'll open it up both to comments from the police chief and assembly members. Ms. Chase.
I can just sit here. It's all right.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. Everything that you hear, you've heard this. Each little confrontation or involvement is getting worse. And I think the Homeless Coalition is great, but it seems to me, when you hear all of these stories about the people who are the taxpayers, and they're paying to be able to go on the bike trails, they're paying for public safety, they're paying for health, and we're the other victim. And a number of you have already experienced this kind of burglary, confrontation, whatever. We are a victim. And what it's doing, at least in my personal self, I'm getting just about totally apathetic about the homeless. And the idea we're going to spend money, to change the road system, to build a campus, and yet we cannot control what's happening in our businesses and even in our homes. Now, there's one other issue I wanted to ask about. My understanding that there is a 24, 48-hour opportunity to move encampment, and they must be called homesteads or encampments. They're no longer camps. We're kidding ourselves. But what happens is the city has to have a place to store them. Okay, I challenge the city on a couple of things here. And I bet that we could get a good part of the city, the community councils involved in this. I bet we can find storage centers to handle this, to help our city. The other thing is, I think we're always talking about manpower. We have the base right here. And we are a good neighbor to the base. They're a good neighbor to us. I would bet we already are in a crisis in our city. We're in a health crisis, a safety crisis. I bet if we went to the bases and said, we need help, we want to move these encampments in the next week.
Linda, that's 3 minutes.
Okay, I bet they would help us. I challenge all of you who are supposed to be working for us. I know you get paid much, but anyway. We will hold up our end. We'll find the space to store it. You guys talk to the military.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you for coming here. Can I get a response from APD, and then we'll use what little time we have remaining, which is kind of negative for assembly comments. Chief Dahl.
Well, just a couple things. I mean, the issues down around Tempton Gamble area, I mean, some of those are new to me personally. The CAP team might already be working on some of those. It sounds like if we saw, 8 or 10 police cars in the area, that there's some law enforcement activity happening down there. Some of the other issues that have been raised, I mean, I think the body's well aware that some of these things, the police department can be a really good partner in helping address some of these issues, but it's not stuff that we can specifically just enforce our way out of. The encampment issue, I mean, I think that right now the department has a pretty good method for tracking and responding to those, but as everybody's well aware, the issue becomes the city's ability to store stuff if we remove it, or have some sort of ready workforce come and deal with that. And that's, having the resources available. I mean, the department can go and hang notices on camps, but if there's not somebody that can come along afterwards and help remediate it, then it doesn't work as a person.
I have Ms. Domboski. Did you still want in the queue?
No, actually.
I have Mr. Trainee, Steele, and Constant.
Mr. Falls, in a meeting a couple weeks ago, you said you were working on an ordinance to register bikes, or at least put it into bike shops. I've not seen anything come forward. I mean, now that you're city manager, can you rehash that and get it to us? Because most of these homeless camps have a amount of more bikes than bike stores do. And we need to have some way to register them so when they're found, we can return it to the owner. Right now, APD every year probably auctions off 1,000 or more on Lake Otis because we can't find the owner. We need to have some way to do that. So if you'd at least work on that again, we'd appreciate it.
If you have to, Mr. Chair, I will say that there is a registry that is functioning now. It's the national registry. You can go on, and there's an APD website that will push you in that direction. I think the larger issue is bicycles that have been chopped with the serial numbers have been mutilated or removed. That's the issue that we're investigating. We want to make sure that it's not just another citation that doesn't result in any actual behavioral change. So we're keeping to work that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Falsey.
Mr. Steele.
Yeah, I'm pretty much up to here with the issues, with the excuses that we've had to make, and there were real issues in terms of the personnel issues with the APD, the training schedule, the fact that we have to get people trained to get them up to speed. The homeless camps, we had 15 days, we had to notify it. This is a serious problem that needs a serious solution, and we need to take it on as a committee to work with the administration and to find something that's going to work, because the frustration that these folks are feeling are the frustration that I hear throughout the community, and I certainly feel it as well.
Mr. Constant.
Yeah, thank you. So I get these emails and messages every week, these contacts from different people. This one just happened to be the week we have a public safety committee. And I receive messages from advocates for the homeless regularly, telling me, why aren't you being an advocate? Why can't you help us find more cold weather shelter units or warming centers and all of these things? And I say back to these advocates, I go to these homeless committee meetings, and there are 40 advocates for homeless people there, and 2 members of the community who live nearby. And the members of the communities who live nearby these services get pointed at as the cause of the problem. Well, it's because we aren't able to help these people. In our meeting last week, I heard this conversation again about we need to take care of these homeless people, and I get that. I get that as much or more than anybody in this room. But the bottom line is I'm done with the carrots side of the equation. There are 40 paid advocates in the city working hard on that question. I'm going to work hard to represent my neighbors who are victims as well in this. It's time that we take this on, and I really do challenge us to have some work on this question before December 5th, so when we do move that ordinance, we can take it on in a comprehensive way and not just more soft sell. We need to do more, and it needs to be more about taking back the homesteads that are created, because that is what's happening now. It's gone. Our parks in the downtown are no longer safe for the general public to be in. And I live right there, and I live really close to 11th and Hyder, and I recognize that the state troopers were out there, APD was out there clearing up a counterfeit ring, but the pictures in the packet I handed you do not do justice. I do ask you to drive by there, take a quick turn left off of Gamble onto 11th, and just see what it looks like. And they do move the cars around, and the mobile shooting gallery moved right next to my house this week, and it doesn't have a license plate. The picture's in the packet here. And so we need help, and I love that people are coming around. We need help, and I am advocating for cleanup funds in the budget. You'll see an amendment to that effect, because we do also need to go behind the police who are just circling and circling and circling, and the camps don't get cleared.
Mr. Peterson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I was watching a story by one of our local news stations just a few days ago, and the number that I heard from them was a little bit shocking to me. And they were saying that they had transported, I believe it was 6,000 individuals that had I think it was fire station number 1, the ambulance unit down there. That's an unbelievable large number of calls for service. And it's to the point where that is basically all that particular station is doing is going to calls for service from homeless individuals in the downtown area. So we're already spending a large amount of our resources on this issue one way or another. So, it's either spend it this way or spend it another way, and maybe we need to find a different way to spend our resources to try to get ahead of the problem instead of just reacting.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. The Assembly Chair has asked me to wrap it up. We're about 10 to 15 minutes into the next committee. I appreciate the time. Didn't mean to cut you short. What was referred to, I am sure it was not 6,000 individuals. It was 6,000 calls, and it was probably a lot fewer individuals on repeated calls, and that's part of the problem. We will be having a joint Public Safety and Homelessness Committee on the ordinance that lowers the notice time from 15 days to 10 days. That's, I think, an important part of this puzzle, or I wouldn't have introduced it, but it's not the entire picture, and in particular, camp cleanup enforcement that is having enough to, bodies and managers to actually make that happen, and a lot of other components to it. But reluctantly then, thank everyone for being here. I'll gavel out this public safety meeting.